we should be good to go.
Great. Well, thanks everyone for joining us for today's seminar. So our speaker today is Boubacar Kanté. He received his PhD in 2010 from Université de Paris Sud.
Yeah, Paris Sud.
He was then a assistant professor starting in 2013 at University of California, San Diego, transitioning to associate professor. And then most recently in 2018, I believe, he switched over to University of California, Berkeley, where he is an associate professor. And his research focuses on wave matter interaction and nano-optics. Received a number of awards, including the Moore Inventor Fellow, ONR Young Investigator Award, NSF Career Award, a number of teaching awards and fellowships. And I'm really excited for Boubacar to introduce us to his research today, and honored that he accepted our invitation to join us. And before we get started, a couple of administrative tasks. Feel free to throw in questions into the chat. Boubacar mentioned he'll be happy to take them as we're going through the seminar. And then also, if you're interested in meeting with him after the seminar, let us know and we can put you on the schedule. So with that, I think, Boubacar, you can get started. I'm looking forward to hearing more about your work.
Thank you, Elena, for the kind introduction. So good morning, everyone. So thank you for coming to the seminar. So today I would like to share with you a couple of work that we did during the last few years. Part in San Diego and I would say the last almost 2 years here at Berkeley. So and in what I call topological light sources and sensors. So I will discuss what I mean by that in the next hour. So I mean, just a quick overview of things that we do in the group. So actually I did my postdoc here at Berkeley before moving to UCSD and coming back. So at the time, I used to work on metamaterials, so my research has shifted a little bit. So we used to work on this type of structures. So this is an area of closed metallic rings. This area of metamaterial actually started with the proposal of split ring resonator to create artificial magnetism at high frequencies. And then we showed that we could actually couple negatively a closed ring to induce a broadband negative index. I think this is still the broadest band negative index reported. And then, so this is a topic that I will discuss today. So we propose a way to implement what we call topological laser. So this is a laser that is not only non-reciprocal. So you basically don't need an isolator for it because it is already self-isolated. And it can also have arbitrary shape. So potentially you could pack more components on chip because the form factor is not very important anymore. So I will also talk about singularities known as exceptional points. So, and actually I will particularly discuss how we can implement those with polaritons and with plasmons in particular. So the conventional approach to those singularities is parity times symmetry. But if you go to smaller scales, so you can't really distribute loss and gain at will anymore. So I will propose an hybridization approach to it. And actually using this approach, we actually currently hold the record for nanosensing with plasmons. So if time allows, I will talk about these BIC lasers, and in particular, the scaling, why we can make laser with those. So those are extended systems. So those states have been observed, including at MIT by the group of Professor Soljasic. And so of course it is a high-Q mode, and photonic crystals are also known to have many high-Q modes. So the question is, why can BICs actually make a laser despite the presence of all other modes in the system? So we propose an approach to it, and actually this is due to the unique scaling of these cavities. So I will not discuss that today. So there's some kind of excitement the last few years on what people call meta surfaces. So a new name for frequency selective surfaces. So, but they are still interesting. So we recently reported what we call a fishnet achromatic metalense. And I think we also hold the record for the efficiency and the bandwidth of these metalenses. So these lens has a bandwidth from about 600 nanometer to 1200 nanometer, and in the entire band, the efficiency is above 70%. So, and I will also talk about this. I call this we can multiplex orbital angular momentum state with topology. And interestingly, we can actually generate directly light with arbitrary OEM. So the OEM basis is unbounded, so but it's not easy to generate large topological charges of light. So you have to use phase plates, and the phase plate need to be structured well. So the resolution of the manufacturing actually becomes more and more challenging as the charge goes up. So here, we can actually generate arbitrarily large charge with a fixed resolution. So I will also discuss that at some point. So of course, I don't need to convince you guys here. I think we all know that cavities are important and they control the spatial-temporal dynamic of light sources and lasers in particular. So many cavities have been invented in the past, and ring resonators are used a lot, and they're actually being integrated now in silicon photonics for real applications. So they work based on total internal reflection. They work very well. They are pretty big, but they work very well. You can also use defect in photonic crystal, basically a defect surrounded by a band gap. That also works. But usually to make this system work, you actually need a few unit cells to create actually the band gap. So people have proposed to go to smaller scale using plasmons or metal optics, as my colleague Ilya Yavlanovich would prefer. So, so these systems also work. Of course, shrinking the size of the cavity comes at the expense of losses. So, and you also lose control over the directionality of the beam. So of course, nothing comes for free. So you shrink things down, you lose in functionality in general. So, and this is another work. Of course, this list is far from exhaustive. So this is a work from my colleague here, Minggu, and this is a work from Kuo Nisheng, where some of these lasers were directly grown on silicon. So an effort that I've been pushing the last few years was to see if we could design more functional cavities. So everything is a cavity, okay? So, or coupled cavities. If we could design more functional cavities, not only make a high Q cavity for lasing, but make the cavity do something else. And in particular, during the talk, I will describe these topological laser that can be the isolator at the same time. And I will also later on talk about these BICs, down setting continuum, that can be the cavity and the beam steering mechanism. So just a brief word on topology. So we have a no range here and a donut, so they are topologically distinct. One has 0 all, the other one. And if you take a material, conventional insulators, so they have a band gap. And it turns out that if you take, for instance, a 2D gas of electron and strongly magnetize it, so electrons move at the cyclotron frequency, and this is actually also an insulator. But it is a different type of insulator called a quantum Hall insulator. So it is characterized by some topological environments. And interfacing to such insulators, so you will see that while electrons are going circularly around the nucleus at the cyclotron frequency, here when they are interfaced, these two types of insulators, electrons at the edge cannot do the full orbit, and they do what is called skip orbit. So these half circles here lead to a edge state at the boundary. And the particularities of this edge state is that it is unidirectional and it is robust. Okay, you can change the shape of the interface and the state still go around. So the theoretical discovery of this topological state led to a Nobel Prize in 2016. And in 2008, actually, one of the awardees here, Duncan Haldane, who was actually at UCSD at some point, apparently, so I learned that recently. So he proposed to transpose these ideas from fermionic system to bosonic system. He wrote a paper in 2008 in PRA, and immediately after, the experiment was done by the group of Professor Stojastich. So the idea was basically to guide light on a robust interface that is topological. Of course, robust waveguiding is important. So, but I was not sure. So I read some of these papers. So when I started at UCSD, I was not sure if we really needed a new waveguide. Even for the quantum internet, that will hopefully, be deployed at some point. So a lot of work is going on that. We are still expected to use the fiber optics that are deployed now, right? So we can transport quantum photons with current waveguides. So what we try to think of is of devices that will be uniquely enabled by this topology. And what came from discussion with one of my colleagues at UCSD, Professor Shaya Feynman. So we actually proposed, the proposal was rejected, but we proposed to make cavities that use topology. So the cavity is nothing but a closed contour between two topologically distinct mirrors. So we have two mirrors, one mirror being trivial, the other one non-trivial. And so if you interface two such mirrors, so light is basically bound to circulate at the boundary. Right, so, and because the cavity is topological, so the actual shape of the cavity does not really matter. You could move from this shape to this to this. So in principle, it should operate the same way. So this was an idea, but the question was, how do you actually make this? Okay, so that's the question. How do we create these mirrors? So the assumption, so at the time, including, if you read the paper of Duncan Haldane, so the assumption was that the quantum Hall effect, that was the primary way to create topology, could not be transposed to optics because optical magnetism is weak. So in the Duncan Haldane paper, so he explained that maybe we could actually extend some of these ideas to the terahertz range, that really optics will not be possible. So this is really what I found interesting. So I started doing some calculation with my students, and we found that it will be challenging to do, but it is possible. And the platform that we proposed is this platform. So it is an hybrid platform that uses a free-phase semiconductor. So we are using InGaAsP multiple quantum wells bonded on some magnetic material, garnet-based, so yttrium iron garnet. And we basically design on this platform the two mirrors that I just talked about. The one that is trivial, that has a broad band gap. It's a mirror over a large range of frequencies. So this mirror, and another mirror, of course, because magnetism is weak, that actually cannot have a very broad band gap. So that band gap is extremely small here. It is on the order of few tenths of picometer. So you could extend it to nanometers or a little bit more with other ideas. But this band gap only exists when the substrate is magnetized. So when you turn on the magnetic field that is perpendicular to the photonic crystal, so this band gap opens. And if you turn off the magnetic field, of course, that changes the properties of the material here, the band gap closes. So it's a very, very narrow band gap. That is the key because now you will have a mirror on this side and mirror on this side, and you can interface them. And so that's basically the idea. So we did some calculation here. So I'm showing the non-trivial crystal on the left side, the trivial crystal here. And if you put a source at the interface of the two crystals, so you see that for a magnetic field pointing up, light propagates forward. And when you flip the magnetic field, so forward propagation is forbidden and light goes backward. So, so we tried to do the experiment and propose to the cavity that you see here. So this cavity is a closed contour again. So the shape does not really matter. So here we mimic the shape of the US. So Canada is on the south and Mexico on the north, just for fun. So and then again, one of the crystal has a trivial topological invariant, so 0, and while the other one has a topological invariant of 1. So interfacing these two crystals should lead to unidirectional propagation of light at the interface. And in order to prove that we are really unidirectional, so we propose here to couple the cavity to a defect waveguide. And for light, let's say going counterclockwise, you will see light exiting from the right side of the cavity. And if you flip the magnetic field, you can actually dynamically switch light from this right output to the left output. So here is an STM image of the devices that we fabricated. So I'm not going to fabrication details. So this is the top view of the device. And in order to characterize them, we pump the entire surface of the cavity. So there are other words that I can comment if you guys have questions later on. But we pump the entire crystal. So bulk modes have low Q. We calculated that. And what happens is when the magnetic field is off, you mostly see a spontaneous emission out of the entire photonic crystal. And when you, because why is that? There is actually no cavity when the magnetic field is off. As I said, the non-trivial photonic crystal has no band gap. So by turning on the magnetic field, you open the gap of the non-trivial crystal. So the center then becomes also a mirror, and the edge states that you see here appears. So, and then we, characterize it as lasers are characterized, light curve, etc. And also measure the isolation ratio between the port of about 10 decibel. So the isolation ratio, the contrast of light from these right and left outputs. So this was really exciting. I think I'm very, very excited by this work still, because this is something that was really believed to be impossible. So that was the assumption, and many, many other approaches using either the spin Hall effect or the Valley Hall effect have been pursued for lasing as well. But of course, none of those really lead to non-reciprocity. So the only non-reciprocal approach is the quantum Hall approach. So
maybe could I jump in with a question before we continue?
Yeah, please go ahead.
So I'm guessing that this is an external magnetic field that's applied. Could you also think about ways to apply this magnetic field in an integrated way? And is there a limit to how small you could get these devices?
So that is a good idea. So a good question as well. So you could integrate it. So I mean, we basically build ourselves a solenoid, and then took the solenoid and put the device inside the solenoid with a uniform field to do the experiment. But you could indeed make local circuits. There is a Professor John Bauer at UC Santa Barbara who has been doing similar things using circulators. So he put a circuit on chip and use the local magnetic field created by that integrated circuit to actually magnetize the substrate. So that can be done, absolutely. So, I mean, I'm sure there are other groups doing similar works as well. So, so in order to show that, I mean, the main idea of the cavity is robust, we actually fabricated other shapes that you can see here. And very interestingly, the lasing properties were almost independent of the shape. So regardless of the shape that you make, you obtain lasing at the same wavelength with almost the same isolation ratio. So we are really, really excited by this. And after the work was selected in 2017, I was surprised by that as one of the top 10 discoveries in physics by Physics World. I think mostly because no one really expected this to work. So I still remember reviews from proposal I submitted where people say this is impossible, it cannot work. So it does work. So and then so after this demonstration, so the last year we also asked ourselves if there was other devices that can be uniquely actually enabled by this platform. And so here is an idea. So very simple idea. So you now, I mean, I just told you that the actual shape of the boundary between these two mirrors can be arbitrary. But now imagine that you design the interface so that it is circular. And also imagine that you design the edge state so that it sits above light cone. So what will happen is that you will still have a cavity. Of course, this cavity will not be of very, very high Q because you design it on purpose above light cone. So the Q will be smaller. But when light will propagate around the cavity, so because it is above light cone, it will leak some of its energy out as it goes around. And when you reach stimulated emission, because of the coherence of the beam going around, so the interference of all leaked energy outside the chip will naturally form orbital angular momentum. Why is that interesting? So this is interesting because now there is actually, we know the orbital angular momentum basis is unbounded. So there is no limit to how large the topological charge of OEM can be. So, but there is no real approach on how to generate these states. Of course, we can use faceplate, you can use meta surfaces, etc. But with a meta surface, you have to divide the quadrant within finite sections. So you can only do few of them because the meta element that you use is of finite size. So you cannot generate, let's say, an OEM of 1,000 with a meta surface. At least not easily. The way I mean, not with the conventional approaches. So with this approach, I can generate an arbitrary OEM in the far field. I just need to scale slightly my radius. So the topological charge of the OEM beam is nothing but the number of effective wavelengths in the guided interface. So, and so then, I mean, I can make an arbitrary OEM for a given resolution of phi because my trivial and non-trivial mirror can still be the one we used in the previous work, but we can generate OEM up to few hundreds. Okay, so and then more interestingly, so OEM, I'm not going to the motivation because OEM can be used for communication, it can be used for imaging, for a couple of things, for trapping. There have been lots of work in the past. So, but we can actually directly multiplex light sources that generate OEM. For instance, here, imagine that this is one mirror, one of the mirror that I presented before. Let's say the trivial mirror. So, and then I put the non-trivial mirror outside. So this form a cavity. So this will generate light with OEM of charge L1. And then I put now mirror 1, mirror 2, mirror 1, mirror 2. So you can do this like as many times as you want. Each interface is a laser. So this will be laser 1, laser 2, laser 3, etc. And this laser will generate naturally OEMs. And of course, because the dimension is different, the charge is different. So the OEM are orthogonal. So you can generate spatially orthogonal modes directly from lasers and multiplex them directly from the source. So we fabricated these devices. So this is one of them. And then those are the multiplexed devices fabricated as well. And here is the result. So this is what theory predicts, the fabrication of, I call them quantum Hall rings, or topological ring if you want. Ring 1, ring 2, ring 3, and the multiplex rings. And this is luminescence from the cavities. So it does work again. So, and then we characterize these devices further. We show that we do see in this transition from spontaneous emission to stimulated emission. And we have even measured the second order intensity correlation of these light sources and have observed the suppression of the anti-bunching peak here that unambiguously prove that we not only have a topological laser, but it is indeed coherent. So, so I think we are really excited by this result as well. So this will appear in Nature Physics in the next month or so. So we are not the only one to do this. So there are other work that use these couple rings to create a gauge field, to do lasers as well. But I particularly like the photonic crystal approach because it's very, very compact. So when you make rings, you have to couple many of these rings to create the gauge field. So my entire cavity is actually smaller than a single ring. And you need an array of like 10 or 15 or 20 by 20 rings. So that approach can indeed implement a topological laser, but that topological laser is really, really big. Okay, so this approach is very, very simple and pretty compact. So there has been a work, so I will just say a few words on this, that was published from a group in Singapore, where they basically use a PN junction to pump a topological edge state using the Vallée-Hall effect. So the Vallée-Hall effect is a little bit easier, so it doesn't need a magnetic field, but of course it's not non-reciprocal. So, you can have a larger band gap with this. You see, you have a large band gap here that is topological, and you have many cavity modes, okay, of different longitudinal orders within that band gap. So this work is interesting. So they added here a PN junction to address this cavity electrically. But you see here from the result we obtained, it actually is multimode because you have the band gap is so large, and I mean, you can't really have single mode with at least what they proposed. We were working on this idea as well. And actually we had an approach, but unfortunately we lost that competition. So we had an approach, when we saw multimode lasing, we thought that was not good enough. And it's very simple, the Vallée-Hall approach. It is a MOS2 type of unit cell, an hexagonal lattice with inversion symmetry broken. And then you create a topological interface by swapping the position of the big and small hole across an interface. So you see on this crystal here, the small hole is close to the interface, and here the small hole is close again. So the periodicity is broken at this interface. Of course, the shape of this platform can also not be arbitrary, so it has to be along KK prime directions. So, so what we found is that you have many modes, and there are actually different regimes. There is a regime of guiding below light cone, a regime of guiding above light cone, a regime where you have basically slow light, and one side of the triangle is sufficient to get feedback and localized light. So you localize light in that case on one side of the triangle, and there is also a regime where light is localized at one of the corners of the triangle. So you have many modes in this system, as shown in the paper that was published in Nature from the Singapore group. So the question is, how do we make this system single mode? So I'm not going into too much detail here, but we found that we can make the system single mode by controlling what we call the degree of asymmetry of the Vallée-Hall platform, which is basically the contrast between the small and the big hole. And doing that, here is what we obtain. Using the Vallée-Hall platform, we indeed get single mode lasing. And yeah, clearly here from this cavity. So the cavity has a lot of modes, but I can make one of them lase by increasing its figure of merit. by making it much better than all other modes in the cavity. So, so I will stop here on this platform and continue on another type of cavity that is called bound state in continuum. So the project laser that I just presented is a way to generate light on chip directly, non-reciprocally, without using an isolator. So this idea of BICs, they also have some topological properties, was initially proposed by Fonderman and Wigner, the first to actually bring the idea in optics was Borisov at University of Paris, actually where I did my PhD. So, but I didn't know him at the time. So he was at the Laboratoire de Physique des Solides, and I was at Institut d'Électronique Fondamentale. So he proposed what I call a Fabry-Perot approach to these BICs, and they were observed again by a group of marine at MIT. And so this is an additional cavity. So the question is, what are these BICs good for? So I will discuss that in a minute. And we propose a multiple approach to BICs. So I will discuss this approach and tell you what can be done with this BIC in a unique way. Okay, so they are also pretty simple. So when you take an electronic system, you have the threshold and states that are above the threshold are quasi-bound. Basically, they are resonances of finite lifetime, and states, of course, that are below threshold are bound. And the question that Fonderman and Wigner asked themselves in the 1920s, long time ago, was whether you could actually perfectly bound a state that is above threshold. And the response was yes, you can easily show it. So you just need to implement this oscillating potential. This was in electronics, of course, this has never been implemented. And of course, Maxwell equation and Schrödinger equation looks alike. And there's a lot of work now in optics, just mimicking what happens for electrons. But indeed, similar things can be done with light. So, so here is the approach that we propose to it. So this is a microwave approach. So I used to work on microwave quite some time ago during my PhD. And I'm describing here a simple multiple approach to implement this bound state in continuum on demand. So consider a microwave waveguide, a metallic waveguide that you can directly connect to a vectorial network analyzer and measure scattering parameters. So you load the waveguide with scatterers and particles, dielectric particles of finite index. So they have resonances, me modes, and you can relate the scattering matrix with an effective Hamiltonian. So basically saying that you have a bound state in the continuum simply means that this effective Hamiltonian has purely real eigenvalues. So because these particles are dielectric, so they have no absorption loss. So the only loss mechanism is radiation. So saying that you have a BIC simply means you are canceling radiation via destructive interference. So how do you make that happen? So what we propose is to use me modes of these particles, but the interference can only happen between me modes in particular conditions. So there are some symmetry requirements. For instance, in this geometry, so two modes of one of the particle or two modes from each of the particle can interfere if they have the same symmetry with respect to the OXY plane. So I will discuss later on why I put two particles. One, the green one is enough to see a BIC. So, and the only thing you have to do is to control this effective Hamiltonian via avoided resonance crossing by modifying basically the geometry of your system. So we classify modes in this geometry using the Caffège and Guyon nomenclature. So these particles have many modes: transverse magnetic dipole, axial electric dipole, etc. And similar modes in the second particle. I will again explain this all later on. And of course, in the geometry that I just presented before, so mode of the same symmetry can interfere. So this even mode and this even mode can interfere. So all these even mode can interfere. And the even mode of this particle can also interfere with the even mode of the other particle. So the only thing that I have to do is to bring them to the same frequency, because you need to have the same frequency to interfere. I just need to modify the geometry while maintaining the symmetry and make avoiding resonance crossing happens between modes that are symmetry compatible. So, so that's what we did here. So this plot is a little bit complex. So just look at the left axis and the horizontal axis, of course, and the blue, green, and red curve. So when you change the height of the particle, so these three curves do not meet. So there is no way they will interfere then. So the height is not a good parameter to make avoided resonance crossing happen. So now, because of perturbation theory, you know, of course, energy of these me modes is sitting in the particle. So if you drill a hole, so you can perturb the mode again. And in that case, in particular, so the HEM21 delta mode and the TM01 delta mode overlap here. And because these two modes are of the same symmetry, actually you are basically tuning continuously the phase when this avoided crossing happen. And at the point where the phase is exactly pi, so the two modes fully cancel. So basically you started with two modes that were very leaky, bad modes, and you made one of them perfect, and you made it a bound state in the continuum. So at that point, its quality factor can diverge and become infinitely large. So we can do that with that green particle. I can also do it, as I said, by coupling most of the green and the blue particles. So the only thing that changes is that now you'll have near field coupling, not only far field coupling via the anti-emission term. So, so that's what we did here. We coupled now the blue and the green. So of course, then you have more modes, 6 modes in this frequency range. 5 avoided resonance crossing. 1 is here, 1 is here, 1 is here, 1 is here, and 1 is here. And whenever the symmetry is the same, you can expect a BIC. And you can see that here from the scattering parameter, you have a BIC here, another one here, and another one here. So you can indeed now implement this bound state in continuum on demand, simply using multiples. So what else can we do with that? So a laser. And that's what we propose here. So in the micro experiment, I showed you a single particle in a waveguide. So of course, this is a virtual array. It's not a single particle because with the metallic boundaries, you actually have an array. In optics, we don't use metallic waveguides. So then I have to actually make the array. So the array in the end is a photonic crystal. So, and why is this different from conventional surface emitting photonic crystal? I will also discuss in a minute. So the platform here is a photonic crystal made of particles that are connected here just for mechanical stability using the same approach that I just described in microwaves. And so we designed these cavities. They can have indeed infinitely large quality factor. You can see it from an eigenmode picture or from scattering parameters. And then when you make these devices, they also laze, okay? So of course, this is a photonic crystal now. It is an extended system. It has a lot of modes. So a question that you may ask is, how do you know that this is in fact the bound state in the continuum? Why this is not what has been done before on photonic crystal? And the response is in the scaling of these cavities. So for instance, for the free mode that I have presented on the dispersion, so we are here showing the quality factor in reciprocal space. So the mode that have been conventionally used to make surface emitting photonic crystal lasers is this symmetry protected mode, okay? So it is symmetry protected, or of course it is of high Q because the mode is symmetry incompatible with free space modes. But this mode, as you can see here, has a quality factor that decreases very quickly when you move away from high symmetry points, the gamma point here. Q goes down very quickly. For BICs based on destructive interferences, so the Q does not go down as quickly as you can see here. So these two modes are degenerate for this particular design at the gamma point, but it doesn't need to be at gamma. So, and what does that mean? So it means that in practice, so devices that we make are always of finite size. So when I make a device of finite size, I truncate this dispersion, okay? So, and if you truncate it, the area that you get below the red or the green, the blue or the green curve is of course larger than the area that you get below the red. So what does that mean? It means that on a device of finite size, I can guarantee that the BIC mode will laze, not the symmetry protected mode. So this is interesting. This is exactly I was not doing research at the time, but if you look at the literature, people have been able to make photonic crystal surface emitting lasers only when fabrication was good enough to make large arrays. So now I say, oh, actually, we don't really need large arrays. With a small array, I can make this system work. So I can make a smaller surface emitting laser using the BIC. So we then decided to work on the other side of the spectrum. We even did 4x4. So this here I'm showing, so 8x8 resonator up to 20x20. So we change the size of the array. We also change the size of the resonator, the radius. And the dashed line here is the dispersion of the symmetry protected mode. So the mode that has been conventionally used for photonic crystals. And the black line is of both our theory. What is theory for our BIC? Okay, and many devices of various size and also of various dimensions, they all lays on the BIC mode that we designed. And the threshold of the lasing was also minimum, close to the bound state in the continuum singularity. So this was the first demonstration of a bound state in the continuum laser. And there are many things that can be done with this approach. For instance, let's say you change the radius of the resonators. So I have shown a design where the BIC was at the gamma point, but when I change the radius, look at what happened. The BIC moves away from the gamma point. It can be at other points. So what does it mean, moving away from the gamma point? That means beam steering. So, so you can do beam steering with an array that is not a conventional phase array, because a phase array, you have a change of phase from point to point. So here, all the resonators are of the same size, yet the system can emit off normal. Okay, so this is a simulation, and we fabricated devices in C, D, E, F. So we tested them. So this is the light curve for one of the tested sample. And here is a reciprocal space in experiment. So for a device fabricated in C, so this experiment, you see it's emitting at the gamma point. And then, of course, in D, E, F, when you are not at the center, so the distance from the center to the point is actually the angle. So here, so when I move from C to F, the angle increases. Actually, you are kind of steering the beam. And of course, you see 4 spots because the crystal has 4-fold symmetry. So you have 4 singularity in reciprocal space. So it's a way to do beam steering. Of course, this is static, or you could, for instance, make this on a phase change material, and changing the substrate index will effectively change the radius of the hole, and you could do dynamic beam steering with this. So, so I think, yeah, this is interesting. This device basically combines naturally the cavity and the beam steering mechanism. So a way to make system more compact. So I will shift gear a little bit because I also promised to talk about sensing. So in the last few years, there have been a lot of interest in topological singularities in general. I just talked about a few of them. So here is another one, exceptional points that are also actually pretty simple. So when I take a resonance, resonators have poles, and usually these poles are distributed in the complex plane. If by some design or by some approach, you are able to make 2 of the pole degenerate, so you can actually, there's a question. Elena, you want to say something?
Yeah, there's a question in the chat, I think from the previous slide.
Okay.
Achint is asking, how do you pump the BIC modes?
So, so we pump the entire photonic crystal. So, so here, so this is a photonic crystal, right? So we come with a pump beam and we pump the entire surface. So you see, this is why it is actually interesting, because there are actually many modes in that extended system, but only the BIC mode lases because it is the best due to its scaling. Okay, so that's how we pumped it entirely. So you could pump it electrically as well, just by doing a PN junction. But here it is optically pumped. So hopefully that responds to the question. So if not, feel free to ask afterwards. I mean, you can, I don't know if people can mute themselves, but they can ask questions anytime. So, so these exceptional points, so you see the degeneracy condition is pretty strong. It's not like the usual degeneration that we think of with just in the real part. So it is a degeneracy both in resonance frequency and in line width. So the mode really, so if you had a system of dimension n, so you have n resonances there. So at that point, you will have n-1 resonance because 2 of the resonances will be exactly the same. Not just close, exactly the same. So it's not easy to make this, but there is a way to do it easily. And that way is called PT symmetry. So when you make 2 resonators and you distribute the index so that the real part is an even function and the imaginary part is a not function. So these exceptional points come for free. So there have been a lot of work on that. So here, for instance, this is PT symmetry, I would say transverse or longitudinal. So you can use many approaches. So the challenge is, I will say a few words on that as well. So these resonances are believed to be good for sensing, but they have always been implemented in dielectric so far. So why? For instance, because let's say you have this passive active. So how do you do this with polaritons? Let's say with plasmons. So it's very hard, because you'll have to distribute gain at the scale of a polariton, which is much smaller than the scale of a dielectric. Right? So for a dielectric, you can get a free-phase semiconductor or some gain media, but for plasmons, for instance, you cannot really do that. But most of the analytes we really want to sense are very small. So the smaller the mode volume, the better the sensing, right? So, so now we really would like to, the motivation here for us was to actually push these singularities to those small scale, where we could actually use such devices, not just for a proof of principle. And here is the approach that we proposed. So we did that some time ago, and it was difficult to make, and we improved the idea. So consider a resonator, an antenna, and couple few of them. Of course, if you only couple 2 antennas, you will get a symmetric and anti-symmetric mode. And that's not good because the symmetric mode is a bright antenna, while the anti-symmetric mode is not. It's kind of a dark antenna, if you can say that. So they will always have very different line widths. So there is no way you can make it an exceptional point because the line loss rate will never be the same. Now if I couple 3, at least 2 of them will have the same symmetry, right? So for example, in this situation, so omega A and omega C have the same symmetry. So I can expect these to have similar loss rates. Of course, omega B will be different because it will have different loss rates. Again, here, this is anti-symmetric. So in the radiation, if you see it as an antenna, this antenna will emit pretty badly, while the 3 antennas will emit pretty well. So now, this is again qualitative. So let's think that this system is closed, and we write the Hamiltonian, so the resonance of the 3 resonators, and then the nearest neighbor coupling, kappa n, and next to nearest neighbor coupling, kappa n2. So if you look at this matrix, there is again a problem because I would like to make an exceptional point. Now I know that these 2 have similar symmetries. There is something I can do. But the problem is that this matrix, initially at least, when these bars are aligned, kappa n is much stronger than kappa n2, meaning that this matrix is almost tridiagonal. And we know that from linear algebra that tridiagonal matrices have interlaced eigenvalues. So meaning that the mode will be like odd, or even odd, even. And that's not good for coalescence. So I need to do something if I want to make this mode coalesce. I need to lower kappa n to move away from a tridiagonal matrix. So I need to lower kappa n so that it becomes comparable, so that kappa n2 cannot be neglected. So, and how I do that? I shift the central bar. So the interaction here is mostly Coulombic, so it's a near field Coulomb interaction. So if I shift the central bar, kappa n will decrease. And then I can start to expect to engineer this Hamiltonian. So, so that's what we did. So I will go a little bit quickly here in the interest of time. So for instance, if I take 3 bars, so I'm changing dx, I'm shifting the central bar. So you see what happened is one of the resonance frequency, this is resonance frequency and this is the loss rate. See the resonance frequency of one of the mode goes up while the resonance frequency of this mode goes down. Easy to understand. So here, when you shift the bar, this near field Coulomb interaction, the plus-plus interaction that is repulsive, this interaction is become now mostly attractive. So you have lowered the force here. So that's why this resonance is actually shifting. So likewise for the over mode. So these resonance go up and then this one goes down. You see there is a crossing of the resonance frequency, but there is an avoided crossing of the loss rate. So in order to make an exceptional point of order 2, the order is number of modes that coalesce, I need at least 2 parameters. So one parameter is the shift here, and the second parameter that controls coupling is the distance between the resonators, D, the distance between these bars. And you can, this value is not really important, so I just want to encircle the singularity. So any distance smaller than this is fine, and any distance larger than this is fine. That just means the singularity is between D1 and D2. So here, by going on the overside of the singularity, now the loss rate cross and the resonance frequencies avoid. So you have switched the dynamic of the coupling of this mode from resonances crossing and loss rate avoiding crossing, now to resonances avoiding crossing and loss rate crossing. So that guarantees the existence of an exceptional point. And we have also shown that actually this is very general. Whenever I couple an odd number of resonators, it will always happen. So here I have 3. If you couple 5 resonators, you get an exceptional point again. If you do 7, 9, etc., it will always work. But how do we make this? 3 resonators aligned at the nanoscale. This is a very complicated fabrication. So we propose another approach to lower the number of resonators, just using 2. And here is the scanning electron microscope image of what we fabricated. So I said initially that it was not possible with 2, but it is. But you have to break symmetry twice, and the 2 resonators need to be frequency detuned, okay? Because when the 2 resonators are frequency detuned, you don't create purely symmetric and anti-symmetric mode anymore. you create hybrid modes. So they are both partially symmetric and partially anti-symmetric, and they can now interfere. And the interference can serve as additional way to control the interaction between the modes. Basically, the anti-emission coupling term becomes enabled again. So doing that, again, see, when this mode, the resonators are exactly of the same size, it is not passable, as I said. So the resonances can cross, but the loss rates here are very different, blue and red. So when the resonances are, the resonators are detuned, so this is an array, side view of the array. Now, by using two parameters, one parameter being dx, the shift of the resonator, same, and the other parameter is py, the periodicity perpendicular to the dipole moment. So you see now that I reach an exceptional point in phase space for some values of dx and py. And here, the resonators are detuned, and the environment is uniform. So you can do the same by using resonators that are the same, but detuning the environment. Detuning the environment means that one bar here is in the substrate, while the other bar is mostly sitting in air. So even if they have the same size, they are effectively detuned. So you do the same. And this is a better configuration for sensing. Why? Because I can directly, the hotspots are on my metallic bars. I can directly functionalize these metallic bars with some type of analytes. And the reason exceptional points are being investigated now, of course, there are some fundamental questions on how noise is amplified, etc. So I will not go there today, but the main idea here is that when I have an exceptional point of order 2, and I perturb my exceptional point, the resonance is actually split as the square root of the perturbation. So for an exceptional point of order 3, it will be the third root, etc. While any other type of resonance like Fano resonances or single resonator will always scale linearly. And of course, when x is small, the square root of x is larger than x. So meaning that if you have an exceptional point, mode splitting will be much larger for small perturbation with an EP than with a linear system. So, so we fabricated these devices. We did sensing with it. We functionalized the top bar with IgG, anti-immunoglobulin G, that is the most present antibody in the human blood. So we functionalize these particles from concentration indicated here up to few tenths of attomolar. And when the concentration is high, so the DP, diabolic point, basically meaning not EP, conventional sensors, is as larger splitting. And then when the concentration goes down, the red splits more, which is normal. So you see, those are the data point, the experimental data point here. So this is square root, and the other one is linear. And we were able to detect up to about 50 attomolar of IgG. And we converted that in molecular weight. And it turns out that the weight we detected is actually 267 times smaller than what was the current record in detecting IgG with plasmonics arrays. So I'm very excited by this. And there are, of course, very important questions that we still have to respond. Let me just quickly comment on what I'm calling here linker limited. So when we decrease the concentration of the analytes, so of course, there is less and less analytes that are being now on your system, right? So the question is, so where can I go? Can I go to 0? Or because at 0 concentration, I mean, the ratio of the delta omega is 1 over the square root of x. So when x goes to 0, that diverges. So to bind IgG on our meta molecule, if you want, on our plasmonic antennas, so we functionalize the antenna with a linker. So when the concentration of IgG goes down, at some point, the linker is actually more perturbative than the linker itself. So that's the limit. So at that point, you cannot detect anymore any variation in the concentration of IgG. So that's what we call linker limited, because the shift induced by the linker is already larger than the shift induced by the molecule you want to detect. And it turns out that that shift induced by the linker is also close to fabrication limit, because I cannot approach the singularity exponentially, because when you do nanofabrication, your E-beam has some resolution, plus or minus 5 nanometer. I cannot guarantee when I make a fabrication for you that your device will be exactly at the prescribed dimension. So there will be some uncertainty around what you prescribed. And that uncertainty also is an uncertainty on how close I am to the exceptional point. So this is currently the limit. It will be very difficult to do more than this. We are exploring overall routes, but I will just stop here and say that we have demonstrated the first topological laser. We also demonstrated, proposed and demonstrated an approach to do BIC using multiples, and I've demonstrated the first BIC lasers. And I also shown that we can actually convert the topology of matter to the topology of light by generating orbital angular momentum, which is topological light using topological photonic structures. And we also demonstrated the first plasmonic exceptional point and did sensing with that type of platform. So I will stop here and thank you for your attention and just showing what I call a topological puzzle. So where you have more degree of freedom. Maybe this can be a toy for the kids in the future. We still need to build it. So thank you everyone, and happy to take any question that you may have. And of course, I also want to particularly thank my group members who are at the heart of all what I have presented today. So thank you everyone.
Thanks, Boubacar. Are there any additional questions? Not, I'll jump in. I have lots of different questions, but maybe I'll just start with one for now. For the sensing application, do you see other types of sensors coming out of this, or other ways to functionalize these kinds of devices outside of
I think the main motivation. So when I was doing this, so let's say when you go to the doctor, for instance, to draw your blood, and they want to see the presence of some type of analyte in your blood. So they draw your blood and they ask you to go home, and they tell you, oh, we send you the results in a few days, right? So why is that? Because what they want to see in your blood, the concentration of what they are potentially willing to detect is too small. So they need the bacteria or whatever to multiply in the sample that was drawn so that it reaches a threshold that can be seen by current detectors. So if you can decrease, or I mean, increase or decrease the weight needed for detection, basically the threshold, okay? So increase the sensing sensitivity. Then actually the result can be given immediately. So that's the main idea. So we want to detect smaller quantities of analytes in a given sample. So that was the primary motivation for this, and this is why we push that frontier. And of course, this is not specific, right? So using at least this plasmonic approach, for whatever you want to detect, you will need to make it specific with some type of linker. So that's the limit of this approach. It's not very specific. But this is an outstanding question in sensing. So it's not easy to do everything at the same time. So usually when you detect, when you know what is in solution and you want to look for that particular thing, so that's easy. But now when you have a lot of analytes, it's very difficult to differentiate them. So indeed, so there is some limit to it because the linker basically detects something specific, but you can change linker and detect something else. So that's a great question.
So I'm guessing this question of the engineering of this linker is a maybe future exploration that needs to be done.
Yes, yeah, indeed. But I mean, at least that's not what my group does, right? So it's more chemistry, you know, doing different type of linkers that can bind to specific analyte, etc. So that's not the type of research that we do. But we'd be happy to do it to discuss and collaborate with other groups. So what we are primarily interested in is how to use light or the interaction of light with some type of nanostructures to really push the sensing limit to much smaller values compared to what is possible today, so that we can do early diagnosis. So that's the primary motivation of the group.
And also for the BIC lasing modes, where do you see that going in the future, or different types of applications or systems that you could address?
So, I think that's an interesting question as well. I know yourself, you're working quite a bit on beam steering and LiDAR. So those are natural places where potentially this could go. So we may, instead of using an external laser, so that's a lot of motivation in what I do, right? So in silicon photonics or in LiDAR, etc. So there are different approaches. Right now, you can either use a laser, make your chip, and then feed your chip with an external laser. Or the idea that I try to push, and it will take some time to demonstrate all of those, but I would like to put the laser directly on chip because I think this would be much better in terms of form factor, etc. So you could, for instance, use this type of arrays in the future to do illumination of your scene directly without using an external laser. So that's the type of idea that I am pushing forward.
I have a question. Can I go?
Mm-hmm.
I have a question. It's a bit general question about plasmonic sensing of these very small concentrations.
Mm-hmm.
Given that the volume in which your sensor detects is very small and your concentrations go very, very small,
mm-hmm.
What do you expect how do you expect to solve the issue with diffusion times, given that for a molecule to reach your sensor in a volume with a very low concentration, it's going to take a long time at some point, right?
Yeah, that is a very good, yeah, you're absolutely right. So that's a very good question. You're right. So imagine, I just repeat the question a little bit. So imagine that I give you a very small volume. I give you a grain of sand and you put that in that volume and you're looking for the sand, it moves around. So it will find your sensor quickly. But now if your sensor is the ocean and you have a grain of salt there, so it's going to take a lot of time in order to bind to the particle. So that is true. So, but there have been, work from, in this sensing, people are very creative. So, so you can, for instance, even if your particle has a, let's say, small diffusion length, so there are ways to make the particle move around faster so that it finds a binding site, okay? So I've seen quite a bit of work in the literature. That's true, because in the approach that we are doing right now, so when I decrease concentration, of course, it will take more time for the linker to be seeing the analyte that I want to detect. So that's so it is not, that binding will take some time. You could, for instance, increase temperature, but of course, there are many things that come into play because your linker needs to be compatible with those temperatures, etc., so that your analyte moves around faster to find the binding spots. So is that the question, Carlos?
Yeah. Yeah,
I mean, I think it is a great question. So I don't have a full solution to it, but I've seen a lot of things in the literature. So you can, for instance, heat up your sample slightly so that it goes faster. But there are many constraints that I did not discuss at all in the paper.
Right, thanks a lot.
So, just to follow up on that, other than temperature, what else can you do to make it faster?
So I mean, what I have seen, people have even had sensors that move around themselves, right? So so I have seen, for instance, work from Joe Wang, who was in nano engineering at UC San Diego. So where he was basically using some type of magnetic particles and steering the particle around in a solution so that it meets binding sites faster or analyte faster. So I have seen work like that as well, but I haven't done anything on this myself.
I see, thanks.
Yeah, specificity. So I mean, it's almost like I would say like the Heisenberg uncertainty principle, right? So you cannot have everything. So if you want to be sensitive to small quantities and do that also precisely and quick, so that's very hard. So of course it is in engineering, but that's what engineering does. No, it is hard, but we're trying to find an optimum on that landscape. So now we did not think about that rigorously at all, but it is a good question.
Following up on that, wouldn't you want to increase your detector volume to?
So yes,
that's a bit of a problem with plasmonics, right?
So here, actually, we are doing that already in this platform, right? Because if you look at the detector is actually not a single plasmonic particle; it is an array.
Right.
So it is a large volume, right? But we are doing ensemble measurements as well, right? So because your concentration is small, but many of these particles are being attached to different resonators. And as the concentration goes down, there is less and less analyte on a single resonator. Right? So that's so the volume is large here. So if you want to do this sensing with, let's say, with single plasmonic particles, so of course that become even, your question become all the more relevant, because now I have to make sure that the analyte goes to that single particle, which makes things even more challenging. Yeah. So maybe let me take this opportunity to actually highlight something. I'm not sure people have noticed that, but you know, when we do at least work that has been done before, you know, if you look at plasmonic sensors, so the main idea was that I have a resonance, and then so I put some type of analyte there that this is just refractive index sensing, and the resonance shifts. And the main limitation was that actually when I have a resonance, because it's plasmonic, it's lossy, so I cannot detect things if I shift less than the line width, right? So, but in fact, that's not really true, because in our approach, we have two resonances instead of one. We reach an exceptional point, but I can detect a shift that is much smaller than the line width because I'm doing a coherent detection. I'm looking for the eigenmode of this system, and I can find this eigenmode by doing a complex scattering measurement. I didn't discuss that here, but it's not only an intensity measurement. You need the complex scattering matrix in order to find the eigenmodes. And there is absolutely no limit, of course, within the noise of your experiment. So fundamentally, there is no limit to how close this eigenmode can be to be seen. And this is really the departure, and this is how we have actually improved the sensing limit, because people have always assumed that, oh, actually, this is why a lot of work that you can see in the literature, there are so many papers on Fano resonances, etc. So why is that? People are fighting to try to make the resonance line width small, so that when the resonance shifts, they can actually observe it. So we claim that that's not necessary. So with this exceptional point, or even actually not really with the exceptional point, I could do the same thing with a simple resonance, but provided that you do complex scattering measurements. So that's the key. Because in the end, I mean, we didn't have enough time to go through all the detail, but if you look at it here, I have larger splitting with the exceptional point at small concentration, but I do detect it with the diabolic point too. So this one is not an EP. So it is a Fano resonance, but I see it. Of course, the splitting is smaller, but it is detected, right? So I think this is a subtlety that I didn't discuss, but of course, if you're interested, feel free to email me. I'm happy to discuss it as well.
Nice, thanks.
Stefan, would you like to stop the recording?
Yep, sounds reasonable. If